evening, I want to talk about some of my favorite apps and techniques that you can use to produce great photos and videos, not just with your iPhone, but also on the Mac. So let me start. I'm a videographer. These days, my brain is wired to shoot video. And just so you know, I'm not a pro photographer, but I do love photography, especially when I travel. And over the years, I've picked up a few good habits. So I want to share some of those tips with you. I'm going to show you a lot of slides this evening and images, but I promise I'll go through them quickly. And I won't try to give you an in-depth tutorial or too much technical info on every app. But rather, I just want to make you aware of a feature or two that makes an app special. And if you're interested in it, you can go check it out and you can take it from there. So first off, Camera Plus version 2. It's an iOS app. And if you're looking for an advanced camera app that offers more features than Apple's standard camera app, this one is a really good choice. You can shoot auto or full manual. You can work in Pro Raw. You can switch to action or portrait modes and a whole lot more. Top it all off, it's only $8. But it has one new superpower that I want to tell you about, and that's called Monuments Mode. So when you take a picture with Monuments Mode, it senses moving objects. It filters them out and it gives you a clean photo of what's behind them. So to go to Monuments Mode, you press a little icon that has the Eiffel Tower on it. Ironically, though, the Eiffel Tower probably isn't the best place to take advantage of Monuments Mode. There are a lot of people and lots of movement, but not quite the right conditions for it to shine. And I'll explain that in a moment. When I think of a busy place in Paris, I think of this. That's the Arc de Triomphe. There's cars, there's motorbikes, there's people, there's pigeons, there's all kinds of activity. So I really wanted to go to Paris and take a picture of it for you using Monuments Mode, but I couldn't. So I did the next best thing. I went to my local Costco store. Now it's a busy place too. There are cars and bikes and people and shopping carts and all kinds of stuff happening. So when you take a Monuments Mode photo, it takes about 5 seconds. And during that time, it's taking a series of images. And after that, artificial intelligence, or AI, does its magic and it filters out all of the motion. And it gives you an image of whatever is standing still. All of that in the app right on your phone. Now, how cool is that? So I went from this, which was a busy day at Costco, to this. Here's the result. No more moving objects, and it turned out actually pretty well. It isn't perfect though. It's best when you have fast movement and movement that's going side to side. In other words, perpendicular to your line of sight. If something is moving towards or away from the camera, or just moving too slowly to get filtered, you get a fuzzy little blob in its place. So if you look at the line of red stanchions on the left-hand side, right at the end of it, you'll see that fuzzy blob I talked about. And really, that was a rack of shopping carts that someone was pushing into the store. But again, away from the camera and not quite fast enough to get filtered. Still, you can crop that image and it's not so bad. Here's another example. This is where I live. This is Canada's Parliament buildings near my home. In the top inset, you can see pedestrians, you can see a cyclist, and in the final image, they're gone. But again, if you look closely, there are still some artifacts left behind, but not bad. So to sum up, when Monuments Mode works, it's terrific. You just have to be aware that conditions aren't always right. So if you're looking for a really good camera app, Camera Plus is a good choice. And think of Monuments Mode as an added bonus that can get you some great shots that you couldn't get otherwise. Next up is an app called Halide Mark II, another iOS app. Now, you all saw the news last month that iPhone 13 Pro models now have a macro capability. So the lenses and the software work really well on the native camera to give you super close-up macro photos. Now, I could show you some examples, except I did not spring for a new iPhone this time around. And if that's you too, the Halide app has come to the rescue with its own macro capability for older phones. That is, phones with a neural engine. So that means iPhone 8 and newer. So here's how it works. First, you have to turn off the autofocus or AF mode. And then you select the macro mode with the little tulip icon. Once you're in it, you can dial in the focus with the focus control beside it, or you can just let it autofocus on the object you have. The other things you can do is slide up or down on the screen and you can adjust your exposure. If you slide left to right, you change your ISO. After that, you just press that white button and you get a nice macro photo. There's two examples. Classic example with coins. What Halide does is it takes the photo and then it upscales it to give you a sharp, smooth image. So you really end up with two images. There's a regular shot and along with it, that nice upscaled macro shot. Here are some photos of late bloomers in my garden, and they turned out pretty well. So bottom line, if you want a full-featured camera app, Halide is an excellent choice. Think of the macro mode again as an added bonus. Price of Halide, you can buy it one time, 50 bucks. You can buy an annual subscription instead for, I think, $12. And if you just want to try it out, there is a monthly subscription for $3, and that should give you an idea of whether it's the app for you. Next is the Luminar app. It's a Mac app from Skylum Software. I have been using this app, I think, several years since version 3. And what it is a pro-level image editing app. It really gives you all the advanced tools that you can think of to enhance your images. There's full auto mode, there's manual mode, there's pro raw capability, you have histograms and waveforms to monitor color, exposure, and focus. Apparently, the new version even removes power and phone lines automatically from your images. But the superpower I want to tell you about tonight is sky replacement. So if you look at photo number 1, it's a pano I took in the Fellows Garden in Cambridge, England. But look at the sky, or rather the lack of sky. Not much there. It was a gray day. And around the time I took the shot, I saw a post by Derek Story. You know Derek, he's a great photographer from the Bay Area. He talked about replacing sky using layers in Photoshop. I thought, wow, let me give that a try. Maybe I can work on this photo and do something with it. So I did. I think I used Pixelmator instead of Photoshop. And it didn't do badly. And that's image number 2. But if you look closely at the sky I replaced it with, you notice that chimney on the left, is beginning to fade into the sky. It's almost transparent. And then over on the right-hand side, where you see the branches and the leaves, you can still see the old sky through them. Now, if you go in manually, you can probably correct that, but you'd have to touch up every one of those little spaces and add your new sky. That's a lot of work. Image 3 is something I did with Luminar, I think it was Luminar 4, in about 10 seconds. And you'll notice that the chimney looks perfect. It's hard to see, I know, at this distance. And even those branches and leaves on the right-hand side, you can see the new sky very well through them. So an excellent result in very little time. Another example, Trafalgar Square in London. In the top image, the sky is certainly overblown, not much there. And in the bottom image, Luminar did a great job in very little time and gave me a nice blue sky with white clouds. You also notice in the top image, there is the birds, probably a pigeon in the sky, maybe a seagull, I'm not sure. And in the bottom image, that little bird came over without a problem. So Skylum software is sensitive to what's in the sky, and Luminar seems to preserve it. How about this image? This is the helical bridge in Singapore. Imagine if you had to work manually with all those trusses and supports to get a new sky to show through. But run it through Luminar, and guess what? You've got a beautiful sky with very little work. So I was really impressed. Let me show you how it works. Here's the interface, and this is in the latest version called Luminar Neo. This is a beta version that I'm showing you. The full release, I think, is coming in December. But if you look along the right-hand side, you'll see some tools. And one of the categories is called Creative. And inside the Creative category is Sky Selection. And here you get thumbnail images of different skies that you can choose. Now, back in the older versions of Luminar, you just got a list of skies, just a list. So it's Blue Sky 1, Blue Sky 2, Sunset 3. You only saw their names. But in this version, you get actual previews. Now, I really like that. So the picture that I'm working on here is one I took a couple of weeks ago in a beach town on Lake Huron. It's a nice enough shot, but really nothing special. So you can go through the thumbnails and pick a replacement sky. And in my case, I decided to go with a sunset. And right away, that makes the shot much more interesting. And you can stop right here. You can save your image, and there you go. But there's more. If you look down again on the right-hand side, there's something called augmented sky. What's that? Well, in there, you will find other things to add to your photo. There's a balloon, there's an airplane, there's lightning, a rainbow, there's even a giraffe. Well, Sauble Beach is not giraffe country, I assure you, so I picked birds instead. And the nice thing is you can resize your background, you can resize the birds, you can move them around until the image looks its best. So the bottom line is, if I had tried to take this shot normally, I could have waited forever on that beach until I had the right sunset. And then I would have waited longer until the birds flew across in just the right formation. But with Luminar, it only took a few minutes. So very neat.
Wally, can I ask you a question there? So the reflection we're seeing on the left side of that banner, is that a reflective surface, or is that an artifact?
Reflection on the left side of the banner.
Above the S of Sauble.
Oh, No, I think that's just that's some of my background original sky coming through into the new sky. You can adjust the transparency of your skies too until they blend as well as you would like them to. Also, your new sky, you can move it up and down until you match it with your existing horizon. So there's a lot of adjustments you can do. And if that bright area, it wasn't to your liking, you could probably tone that down a little bit. So, how
Thanks.
about this? I took this shot on the same trip. It's the town hall in a place called Collingwood. And again, totally dull day and no sky to speak of. Now, same day earlier, I took a photo of a neat cloud formation in the sky about 2 hours before that. And the interesting thing is that Luminar now lets you use your own sky shots as replacements. You just hit that plus button down below the skies area, and you can import your own images and save them right in the app. Now, I've been doing this for a while. Whenever I see an interesting sky, I take a shot and I save it as into my Photos app. So I have a whole collection of different skies at different seasons and different times of the day. Now, if you want to do something like this, you want to shoot the sky, you want to find a place that doesn't have trees or buildings in the way and maybe go to Kansas or Montana or go to the beach or shoot it at sea. Those are all good places to do it. And save those skies, and it might come in really handy later on. So Luminar Neo, right now, I think they have an early bird launch sale on right now. I think it's $54 for one seat, a license for one seat, and I think it's launching in December. Um, to me, it's a great value for the money and a fantastic app that lets you do a lot of neat stuff. I'll show you a few other examples with sky replacement, and these are tricks that you can play with Luminar. Here is lightning over Trafalgar Square. I had that nice moody sky, and of course, it needed a lightning bolt to liven it up. Here's a rainbow behind a giant moai on Easter Island, and lightning strikes on Easter Island too. Here are fireworks over Niagara Falls. And oh, look, the same birds migrated all the way from Sauble Beach to the South Seas. Isn't that amazing? What a long trip. Uh, a moon over Yokohama Harbor, northern lights in Alaska, and also in Alaska. As before, there are no giraffes in Alaska, but there are eagles. So Luminar let me put one of those in the sky. Pretty neat. So that's Luminar Neo. Next, I want to talk for a little bit about Pano Mode on your iPhone. Now, you know the drill. You switch to Pano Mode in the camera app. You hold your phone vertically and you sweep it left to right or right to left across a scene. And automatically you end up with a nice pano. Another way to do it is to hold the phone horizontally and sweep up or down on a tall subject, and you end up with a vertical image. It's a bit trickier. Unless you're really precise in your movement, you'll get some distortion in your photos. But Pano Mode, even in the classical sense, doesn't always work out the way you want it to. So here's an example. Classic horizontal mode, things sometimes go wrong. This shot was in Chinatown in Yokohama. Buildings look really nice, a nice moody shot. But look at those blue circles. You'll see misshapen stick figures that look like zombies moving through the scene. That's because they are moving and the camera motion distorts them. So there isn't really a good way to get rid of them. And if you have those moving subjects, sometimes they'll ruin your shot. This is a pano I took in Niagara Falls, and you'll notice there is discoloration and there are streaks in the sky. And that happens especially if your camera movement isn't perfectly smooth. But if you were paying attention when iOS 15 came out, you may have read this note from Apple. Apple said that Panorama Mode in iPhone 12 models and later has improved geometric distortion, and now it captures moving objects better, and it also reduces image noise and banding. Well, I have not had a chance to do a full test, but this is a pano I took a couple of weeks ago with my iPhone 12 Pro Max. I took it at a conference where I was at a recent assignment, and there was some movement on the floor, but really, that pano turned out really well. There's another way that you can get panos that is very effective, and that's by taking a series of individual photos by moving your camera over a scene, overlapping one photo over the next each time. What you can do then is you can process them or stitch them together on your Mac. A program I used to love was something called Pano Giga. It's an expensive app, did an amazing job, and unfortunately, it's not available anymore. These days, though, if you're a Lightroom user, you can use Lightroom to stitch photos, or you can get something like Panorama Stitcher in the App Store, the Mac App Store. If you're using 5 images or fewer to stitch, it's free. If you want to use over 5 images, Panorama Stitcher is only 15 bucks, but it does a pretty good job. Let me give you an example. Here's the same scene that I showed you before in Niagara Falls that I stitched together from several individual shots. Here's another one that I took in a different season, obviously in the spring, and stitched this one together, I think from 9 or 10 frames. Again, a very effective job by stitching manually individual photos. Finally, this one, this is actually 28 images. It's the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. And of course, I needed more than one series of shots left to right to capture all of the image. In fact, it took 4 sweeps of 7 photos each, one series above the other. And amazingly, those people didn't move enough to ruin the shot. So I was pretty proud of that one. Again, using a series of photos, this is the same situation that I showed you, that pano that I took at the conference of the group. The result using individual stitching actually was comparable to the sweep pano that I showed you before. So maybe iOS 15 has really done the job and improved your pano options. So the last thing I want to talk about is the advantage of shooting iPhone video in 4K. Now, when I shoot B-roll or original footage in my iPhone, I rarely export my final video products in 4K. I usually export my finals in 1080p. That means that I can crop or recompose my original 4K shots in Final Cut Pro. I can give them a better composition, and then I can export them without any loss of resolution. So my final 1080p version looks pretty sharp. This shows you the difference in resolution. 4K is 3840 by 2160. That's over 4 times the area of a full HD high def shot. So you can crop your 4K shot 4 times smaller and still retain 1080p resolution. Nice feature. So here's an example of that I took in a temple in Thailand. And if I can crop this frame and end up with 3 different shots. And that's a big plus when you're editing, because of course, the more variety you have in the footage you take, the better off you're going to be when it's time to edit those shots together. A couple of other examples where you can pull tighter shots out of looser framing and end up with better composition. So that's video in 4K. How about stills? Well, even when you're shooting video, remember that you can always take stills at the same time. And a lot of people forget that. But if you press that white button in this image that appears while you're recording, you will capture a photo. And it doesn't interrupt your video flow at all, because the video will keep recording and you'll save that 4K resolution photo to your camera roll. So if you do the math, resolution 3840 by 2160, you're shooting video, that works out to 8 megapixels in a still frame. Well, it's not the most, but you know, an 8 megapixel still is pretty darn good. You can print it, you can lay it out in an Apple book, you can post it on social media, you can do a lot of things with it. So 8 megapixel isn't bad. But what if you shoot video all day long, but you don't remember to take a lot of still photos? What can you do? Well, as long as you're shooting 4K, you can grab great still photos from your video footage later on when you get back home. On the Mac, there's something called SnapMotion. It's an app. It's only $9. It gives you a lot of capability to grab stills very easily. On your iPhone, there are a lot of apps and a lot of options in iOS. I confess I have not tried them all. There's so many of them. But a couple of have worked well for me. Perfect Pic and Video to Photo. They're each only a couple bucks and a no-brainer. Just have a shot and see how they work for you. So this is SnapMotion on the Mac, and I'll just tell you very quickly how it works. You start with your 4K video, just find it in the Finder, drag it into the main window of SnapMotion, and then you can either play through the video and then stop at just the right spot, or you can scrub through using that slider until you come to just the frame you want, or you can even go forward and back frame by frame till you hit that absolute sweet spot. Remember now, you're shooting video at 30 frames per second, so it's giving you that number of still photo choices every second. So just navigate to the frame that you want, you press that little red camera button, and you grab an 8 megapixel still frame. All you do then is drag it off on your desktop or any other photo, and you have it. Here are a few examples of still frames that I have taken out of video footage. And if I had tried to take the same shot without shooting video, I probably wouldn't have done as well. If I had remembered to press that white button while I was shooting, I could have got some of these shots, but maybe not at just the right spot. But by using SnapMotion, I can navigate to exactly the right frame that I want, and I have a photo. So And for this last tip, I want to show you how you can combine a couple of those techniques. So if you're shooting 4K video and you do a nice camera movement, a nice pan over a scene, say you go left to right and you produce a beautiful motion pan shot. Well, later on, you can open that video in SnapMotion and you can save a series of stills from your video. You can save one from the beginning, the middle, and the end of your pan. Then you can take those photos that you saved and you can use Panorama Stitcher, and voila, you get a nice pano out of a pan video. This is the scene that I did that from, and it's from Hell Valley in Hokkaido, Japan. So let me close by showing you what I think is just a terrific iOS video app that you could have so much fun with. Have a look at some of the effects that you can create with your iPhone.
Didn't like that car anyhow.
Didn't know I lived in such an exciting place, did you? Action Movie is free, believe it or not. It is free, but you can buy a whole lot of different effects packs to use. There's the Star Trek one and the little monsters and all kinds of stuff. And they're only about $1 a piece. So happy shooting.